This video will show you how to make an accessible syllabus, and will teach you the skills you need in order to make any of your documents accessible. So typically for our syllabi and different documents, we use larger text or bold text in order to indicate a title. We often provide titles for different sections of the document. And again, if you're like me, you probably put them in bold, maybe all caps. And this helps people to navigate the document, to find the section that they're looking for, so that it's kind of easy to skim and move from one section to another. However, if you're someone with low vision or poor vision or no vision, these visual cues aren't going to be very useful. So someone using a screen reader, what's going to happen for them is the screen reader is going to read all of the text on the page. And if you don't have the document structure built in, what that's going to sound like looks a bit like this. So notice it's going to start at the top and it's just going to read all the way down. In order to get to, let's say, this course requirements and evaluation section, you're always going to have to start at the top, at the beginning, and listen to the screen reader read all of the text until it hits the point that you want. There's no way to jump forward, to jump from section to section. And oftentimes a syllabus, that's how we use a syllabus. So that's the importance of having an accessible syllabus. And obviously this goes for any document that you create. You want to make sure that it has the page structure in there so that a screen reader can make sense of the document and the organization of the document, just as we do by using these visual cues on the page. So the skills you're going to need to do this pretty much involve highlighting text and clicking buttons. That's all it takes to make your document accessible. So what I'm going to start to do is use these buttons up at the top. These are the different options that you have for formatting your text. And I'm not going to worry right now about how it looks. I am a bit of a control freak. I want my syllabus to look nice, but I'll show you how to do that. So the basics right now, you're going to highlight the title and click on heading 1. Next, you will highlight one of your section headings and select heading 2. So I have different sections of my syllabus: the required text, course description, course objectives. I had a section on Canvas, course requirements and evaluation. And under course requirements and evaluation, I had subsections. So I'm going to highlight those, and I'm going to go with heading 3. And that's because they're nested under heading 2. So if a student wanted to review the course requirements and evaluation and they were using a screen reader, then once they get to that section, they would then be given the options to explore the subsections if they wanted. And so this is basically just like creating an outline. Following these steps also allows you to create a table of contents if you wanted. Probably wouldn't do that with a syllabus, but if you wanted to create a table of contents for a longer document, I just hit References and Table of Contents. You click on that and it will insert the table of contents onto the page based on the structure that you've given your document. All right. So one thing I noticed while going through and identifying the different headings in my document, I have some text here that doesn't fall under a heading. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. So adding those headings can be a good way to find, untitled material or untitled sections. And again, I'm not too concerned with how this looks right now. Okay. So now that I have my headings in there, and again, I'm going to go back and clean this up. I also have a list here. And oftentimes people will just use the dash to create a list item. But the best way to create a list is to use these formatting tools at the top. So you can create a bulleted list and you can choose what those look like, or a numbered list. You can also select letters, or you can create an outline. So here I'm just going to use a bulleted list. And the reason why you want to use a bulleted list is because, again, a student using a screen reader, the screen reader will tell them how many items are in the list. That's going to help them just in terms of navigating the list and knowing kind of what's to come. As a sighted person, I can look at the page and I can see, is this a long list or a short list? And we just want to be able to provide a similar experience and understanding of how the content is organized for someone who doesn't have those visual cues. Okay. And then one more bit. I have a table in my syllabus. And tables can be a little funky when it comes to accessibility. What's to keep in mind is that a screen reader, when it comes to a table, it's going to read it from left to right, top to bottom. So if I was a screen reader, here's how I would read this table. Assignment type, point value, percentage of grade. Reading responses, 200, 4 at 50 points, 33.33%. Case study quizzes, 100, 4 at 25 points, 16.67%. Participation discussion, 100, 67%. Now, this is a pretty short and simple table. A student would be able to probably follow along that these are the assignment types. When it reads a number, that's the point value, and that's the percentage of the grade. But if you had a more complicated table, it would be really easy to get lost in those numbers and in that data. So what you want to do is highlight the header row. So this is the row where you're identifying the different categories. And you can pop over to table design, identify it as the header row. If you have a first column, you could also identify that as the first column or the last column. You can also identify a total row. So that could be something I could add in here. And again, all of that using these formatting features will help the screen reader make sense of the information being conveyed, how it should be conveyed. So by identifying this top row as the header row, a screen reader is now going to read this as assignment type, reading responses, point value, 200, 4 at 50 points, percentage of grade, 33.33%. Assignment type, case study quizzes, point value, 100, 4 at 25 points, percentage of grade, 16.67%. So by returning to the title of that category, it just helps the student or helps the reader follow along and understand kind of what that number, what that piece of data relates to. Next, I'm going to right-click, select Table Properties, and you want to check the box Repeat as Header Row at the top of each page. And that just helps to ensure that that row has been formatted appropriately as our header row. Okay, so now to the fun part, making your document pretty. I'm someone who needed to always have a lot of control over how my documents looked. So I used all of these tools up in the editor to make the font look the way I wanted, the color I wanted, the size I wanted, all of that. So if I were going through that manually, I would have to highlight each piece of text separately and go through and make those adjustments. What's nice is that by adding the page structure into your document, you can make those changes relatively quickly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight this first one, which is heading 2. I'm going to right click on heading 2 and select modify. Here I can go in, I can change my font. I'm going to use my favorite font and make it bold, a little bit larger. I'm also going to go in and change the spacing. You don't want a lot of empty lines on your document. Again, that can be kind of confusing for someone using a screen reader. If you have lots of spaces or tabs, it might seem like the document has reached an end. They're having to listen through blanks, basically. So instead, by changing the spacing, instead of just indenting so many new lines, you can avoid all of that extra space in your document. So I want a fair amount of space before my headings and a little bit after. I'm going to hit OK. Okay. And now anything that was labeled as heading 2 has been changed. And I can go through, I can clean up some of these spaces. And again, it's pretty simple. I have all of this in all caps. These aren't, so I'm going to go in, I'm going to modify. I'm going to add a little bit more space because I really want it to look nice. And then you can also, in your font, you can identify if you want everything in all caps or not. That's the better way to go rather than typing it in all caps. See, so now it all looks consistent. I'm going to fix up my title. Again, you can change the font. I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to center that. All right. Now this section here, I don't like when things kind of leave a lot of space on my documents. So what I'm going to do, and I think what's fairly common, is people will often tab over and create, a new column. So again, it looks nice if we were to just go through and type out the information, but a screen reader, it's going to read it as course details, tab, 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 instructor info, SOC 271, tab, 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 instructor Jess Thompson. So again, it's not reading it in the order that we want. We don't want all of those extra spaces. So again, I'm going to use the formatting tools in Word. Go into layout. I'm going to select 2 columns. I don't think that's the prettiest. I think it looks a little bit better centered. We're going to call that good. So I've added structure to my document. I think it actually looks a lot better than it did previously. Again, I can go through, I can modify headings if I don't like them. And the changes will roll right out onto my document. So I only have to make those changes once. The last piece that I want to show you is if you have an image in your document. So if you have an image in your document, a screen reader is not going to be able to read the image. Instead, what it will do is read a text-based description of the image that you create, and we call that alt text. So to add alt text to an image, you're going to right-click on the image, select Format Picture, and you'll be given a menu that probably doesn't look like this. But you'll select the Alt Text tab. The title isn't very important. The description is more important. And so I'm just going to type cat wearing oversized glasses. And then you'll save it. And you have the alt text for the image. So if a screen reader hits that image, what it will say is there's an image of a cat wearing oversized glasses. Also, if you're using an image and it's purely decorative, if an image is purely decorative, just put a couple of spaces in for the description. That way the screen reader knows that there's no description available and it will skip over the image so that the student isn't stuck trying to figure out what this image is in the document and why it's not being referred to elsewhere. Oftentimes what happens is the file name of the image will be the default description. This is especially true in Canvas. So just keep an eye out for that. And again, super simple. Just right-click, type in the alt text, and you're done. And now we have an accessible syllabus. Oftentimes I think that accessible syllabi look a lot better than ones that are formatted with just the formatting tools in Word. You can change the look of the syllabus. So I've made some, there are just different versions, different styles that you can play with in Microsoft Word. Again, you can go in and define your own. And that's it. So with practice, you'll get it down in no time. All you need to know how to do is highlight text and click. So good luck.